He had more money than he could ever spend, yet nothing in his life prepared him for this moment. A stray dog barked exactly 4 times in front of his table, and what happened next left the millionaire completely frozen, in front of a crowd that would never forget that night. You can buy a 5-star meal, you can own the finest things in life, but when a stray dog barks at you like his entire world depends on it, and you realize it's not just noise, but a message, that's the moment money can't buy. In today's emotional story from Paws and Claws, we follow a man used to ignoring the world, until a homeless dog made sure he couldn't. Where it all begins, the man, the meal, and the bark that wouldn't stop. It started like any other evening, in one of the wealthiest corners of Miami. Palm trees swayed gently under the glow of gold-tinted streetlights. Expensive cars, sleek black Lamborghinis, spotless Rolls Royces, one electric blue Ferrari, were parked like trophies in front of the city's most exclusive restaurant, Le Vrai. Inside, there was nothing but opulence. Crystal chandeliers lit every inch of the ceiling. Live violin music floated above the tables. Every guest wore designer clothing that whispered wealth without shouting it. Conversations were soft, laughs controlled. Even the clinking of glasses sounded expensive. At table 9, arguably the best in the house, sat Victor Carlyle, a name people said softly when they saw it appear in business news or financial headlines. Victor wasn't famous in the celebrity sense. He didn't need to be. His wealth and influence were old money dressed in new ambition. He'd built a hospitality empire that stretched from Miami to Dubai. Most people would have traded their life, savings, just to shake his hand. But tonight, Victor Carlyle was alone. He sat upright, a custom-tailored black jacket draped over his tall frame, a napkin folded perfectly in his lap, his phone in his hand, fingers scrolling, not really seeing what was on the screen. A nearly untouched plate of imported oysters rested in front of him. One corner of his mouth twitched occasionally, as if reacting to an email maybe, but his eyes, empty. He had everything money could buy: private jets, beachfront villas, invitations to galas around the world. But no one noticed the one thing missing from his life: purpose. Victor wasn't eating out of hunger. He was there because his assistant had booked the table, just like she did every Friday. The same time, same table, same drink order. His routine was so predictable, even the staff had it memorized. Life had become one big, sterile checklist. Outside the restaurant, down the sidewalk, and hidden behind a hedge, something moved. It wasn't loud, not yet, just the soft rustle of paws against pavement. No one noticed the pair of eyes watching from the shadows. Dirty fur, ribs showing, nose twitching with each sniff of grilled food and warm bread. The figure sat, waited, and watched. Back inside, Victor scrolled through a news article he wouldn't remember 5 minutes later. And then, bark. It cut through the restaurant air like a car horn at a funeral. Not deafening, but disruptive. Heads turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A waiter paused in the middle of pouring wine. Victor looked up, his eyebrows narrowing. Outside, near the patio entrance, stood a stray dog. Mangy, small, and clearly out of place. His fur was a patchy mix of black and brown. One ear bent awkwardly. He didn't move much, just stood there, tail stiff, eyes locked onto the dining area. Just a stray, someone whispered. A couple near the door turned away, bothered. A woman in pearls held her purse closer. The maitre d' stepped forward but hesitated. This wasn't a fast food joint. Security wouldn't usually be needed for a dog. Victor sighed and looked back at his phone. Bark. Again. This time longer. A bit louder. The dog hadn't moved, but something in the sound felt different. There wasn't desperation in it. It wasn't the whimper of hunger. It was intentional. Victor glanced up again, just for a second. His eyes met the dog's, but he quickly looked away. Ridiculous, he thought. He waved over a waiter. Have someone remove that thing, he said, voice cold. The waiter nodded awkwardly and turned to leave. Bark. Third time. Now it was louder than before, more forceful, as if the dog was insisting. A buzz of conversation began to stir among the other guests. Phones slipped out to record. Some guests rolled their eyes. Others whispered with mild curiosity. Then, something strange happened. The dog moved. It didn't run. It didn't bark again. It walked, with small, deliberate steps. It walked toward the restaurant doors, past the hedges, over the low step, and into the open patio. No one stopped it. The maitre d' tried to speak, but no words came out. It was as if they were all just watching a scene play out. Frozen, silent, the dog walked past table after table. Guests stared, some leaning away as it passed, but no one reached out to stop it. It walked straight, to Victor Carlisle's table and stopped, and then barked one last time for total. And now, the entire restaurant was dead silent. Victor looked up slowly. The dog was just 2 feet from his table. Its paws were muddy, its fur messy, but its eyes, they were calm, steady, not pleading, just focused on him. Victor didn't speak, didn't blink. His mind flashed. Suddenly he was 9 years old again, crouched under his grandmother's porch, holding a sandwich in one hand and petting a dirty mutt with the other. He named that dog Rusty. Rusty had been the only friend he had growing up. One morning, Rusty barked at the window exactly 4 times. Victor had ignored him. Later that day, Rusty got hit by a car. Victor never forgave himself. And now here he was, decades later, successful beyond measure. And yet, right now, he couldn't move. The sound of silverware dropping broke the moment. A woman gasped. Someone's wine glass tipped. The dog sat down, not nervously, just like it was waiting. But why Victor? Why now? And what did the 4 barks mean? Victor leaned forward. Something heavy was forming in his chest. His security guard, who had been watching from the door, took a cautious step forward, but Victor raised his hand to stop him. For a few seconds, man and dog simply stared at one another. Then the dog stood up. It turned around slowly, walked away, not rushed, not limping, just confident. It paused at the edge of the patio, looked back once, then continued walking down the street toward an alleyway. Victor pushed back his chair. Everyone expected him to stay seated, but he didn't. He stood. Without a word, he followed the dog, past the maitre d', past the stairs, out the restaurant. The moment he crossed the door, the whispers exploded behind him. What is he doing? Was that his dog? Did it bark 4 times? Why would Victor Carlisle follow a stray? He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to follow. Victor's mind raced, but his body moved on instinct. Down the sidewalk, past a valet stand, around the block. The dog stayed ahead, just enough to be seen, always looking back to make sure Victor was still following. He walked through alleys he didn't recognize, past a broken fence, toward a shadowed lot that looked completely abandoned. There, tucked behind an old dumpster, was something that made Victor stop in his tracks. A box, torn, damp, stuffed with blankets and newspaper, and inside it, a puppy, smaller than a loaf of bread, barely moving. Its breathing was faint, ribs showing, covered in fleas. Eyes shut tight. The barking dog rushed over and sniffed it, gently licked its ear. Then it looked up at Victor and didn't bark. It just stared. Victor dropped to his knees. He had walked into a 5-star restaurant ready to ignore the world. And now here he was, kneeling in an alley, heart pounding, eyes locked with a stray dog, and realizing something deep, painful, and undeniable. This wasn't random. This wasn't just a hungry dog barking. This was a call, a cry for help. A reminder of something Victor had spent decades running from. And the strange part? He wasn't afraid. He didn't hesitate. He took out his phone. "Hi, I need a vet. Now." The dispatcher on the other end of the line sounded confused at first. "Sir, can you repeat that?" Victor had to pause. What was he even supposed to say? "I'm with 2 dogs. 1 adult, 1 pup. The little one looks like it's not going to make it. I'll pay whatever it takes. Just send someone now. I'll drop a pin." He ended the call and looked around. He wasn't even sure how far he'd walked. The buildings were older here, the windows boarded up, a place someone like him never visited. Not anymore. But the dog had known exactly where to lead him. The older dog sat next to the box again, never once leaving the puppy's side. His eyes kept darting between the pup and Victor, back and forth, like he was checking to make sure they were both still there. Victor slowly stepped forward. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch, just watched. Victor crouched and stared at the tiny creature inside the box. It was breathing, but barely. One of its eyes was crusted shut. Its fur was falling off in patches. It made a soft, wheezing sound with each breath. He looked at the older dog again and finally asked out loud, "Is this your baby?" The dog didn't respond, of course, but Victor wasn't expecting an answer. He felt like he already knew. Then something really strange happened. A memory, one that had been buried for so long, he almost forgot it was real. He was 6 years old, sitting alone in a hallway while his parents screamed in the kitchen. He remembered how cold the tiles felt beneath his legs. He remembered pressing his palms against his ears. And then a sound, scratching. He had turned and found a small, shivering puppy standing at the front door, head tilted. He had opened the door. The dog walked in like it belonged. Victor hadn't even thought about that day in decades. But tonight, out of nowhere, he was reliving it. And the eerie part was that this dog looked exactly the same. Same black and brown coat, same eyes, same 4 barks. Back then, that little dog had saved him from loneliness, from silence, from himself. Victor stared down at the 2 dogs in front of him now, and it hit him. This was no accident. This was fate, and fate had a way of barking, just loud enough to be heard when you needed it most. Back at the restaurant, whispers were flying. Guests who had barely noticed the bark now couldn't stop talking about it. I swear it barked 4 times. That dog knew him. You could see it. Do you think it was trained? No way. That was a stray. Even the staff was stunned. The maitre d' stood silently, still holding Victor's check. The bodyguard paced near the door, unsure of whether to follow or wait. But no one truly understood what had just happened. Victor didn't leave in anger. He didn't storm off. He followed a stray dog into the night, like a man chasing down a ghost from his past. Back in the alley, time was ticking. Victor's knees were beginning to ache. He didn't care. He folded his jacket and placed it gently under the puppy's head. The older dog sniffed it, then looked at Victor again, his eyes filled with something that almost looked like trust. For the first time in years, Victor wasn't thinking about profit margins, or contracts, or press releases. He was thinking about life, the fragile, heartbreaking, beautiful moment right in front of him. 10 minutes later, headlights flashed at the alley's entrance. The vet had arrived. The moment the vet stepped out, she froze. She had gotten dozens of emergency calls before, but never like this. A man in a tuxedo, crouched in an alley, holding a limp puppy, a stray dog, sitting beside him like a statue. "Are you Victor Carlisle?" she asked. He nodded. "I brought everything I could," she said. She stepped forward carefully and opened her kit. The next 10 minutes were tense. The vet cleaned the puppy's face, gave it fluids, injected antibiotics, monitored its heartbeat. The older dog paced in small circles, stopping every few seconds to check on the pup. Victor never looked away. And then the puppy whimpered, a sound so faint you might have missed it, but Victor heard it. The vet smiled. "She's fighting. She's not giving up." Victor closed his eyes for a second, took a deep breath. "Neither am I," he said. And in that moment, the problem wasn't just about the puppy anymore. It was about Victor. This wasn't just about saving an animal. It was about confronting a life he had buried, a heart he had locked up, a part of himself that had gone quiet long ago. The 4 barks weren't just a sound. They were a signal, a coded message from a soul that hadn't spoken in years. The vet asked him a question, one he wasn't expecting. "Are these your dogs?" Victor looked at her, then at the 2 dogs beside him. He had never adopted, never cared for anything that couldn't sign a contract. But his answer came quickly. "Yes, they are now." And with that, the challenge changed completely. What started as a meal at a 5-star restaurant became a test of character, of connection, of whether a man who had everything could still find something worth protecting. The vet loaded the dogs gently into her van. Victor climbed into the passenger seat without a second thought. He didn't ask about the bill. He didn't call his driver. He didn't even check his phone. He just sat there, hand resting lightly on the older dog's back, as the van drove toward the clinic. Some challenges don't come with noise or warning. They come with silence and 4 barks. Victor would later tell reporters that he didn't know what pulled him out of that chair. But the truth was, he knew exactly what it was. Something primal, something buried, something real. For the first time in years, he wasn't Victor Carlisle, hotel mogul millionaire. He was just a man, standing in front of a dog, trying to do the right thing. From money to meaning. What happens when a man who owns everything follows a dog into the unknown? The van ride was quiet. Victor sat beside the vet as the clinic's headlights cut through the Miami streets. In the back, the older dog lay curled around the puppy. Occasionally, he licked her ear softly, like a parent whispering, "I'm here." The vet, Dr. Selena Hart, broke the silence. "You're lucky," she said without taking her eyes off the road. Victor blinked. "Lucky? Yeah. Most people wouldn't have followed that dog. Most people would have just gone back to their steak." Victor stared out the window. "I didn't think," he muttered. "I just felt like I had to." Selena nodded slowly. "Sometimes, we don't pick the animals. They pick us." Victor didn't reply, but something in his chest, something dormant, stirred. The emergency lights flickered as they pulled up to the small 24-hour vet clinic. Victor had driven past places like this 1,000 times, without noticing. Tonight, it might as well have been the most important building on Earth. Inside, Selena and 2 vet techs sprang into action. The older dog was calm, cooperative. He didn't leave the puppy's side. They placed the little one on a warm pad, hooked her up to and 4, and wrapped her in a soft towel. Victor watched through the glass. Every beep on the machine, every flicker of movement, made his heart jump. He'd closed billion-dollar deals without blinking, but now he felt helpless. Selena walked over. "We've stabilized her for now. Her body temp was dangerously low, but she's fighting. She's stronger than she looks." Victor exhaled slowly. "She has a name?" he asked. Selena shook her head. "She was just a stray. Nobody reported her. You can name her if you want." Victor stared at the tiny dog, eyes closed, chest barely rising. Then softly he said, "Hope, who are you really?" "Victor Carlyle." Victor sat in the waiting room long after midnight. The smell of antiseptic and warm coffee filled the air. A kitten meowed somewhere in the back. Rain began to fall outside, tapping lightly against the clinic window. Victor's mind raced. Why did he feel so attached already? Why couldn't he just walk away? He thought of Rusty, his childhood dog, the one who barked 4 times the day he died, the one who'd kept Victor warm during the worst nights of his young life, the one he'd buried in a shoebox under the maple tree in his grandmother's backyard. Victor had tried to forget, but some things don't stay buried. The older dog, now sleeping near Hope's cage, stirred. Victor walked over and sat beside him. He reached down, hesitantly at first, then rested his hand gently on the dog's back. "Who are you, buddy?" he whispered. "And how the hell did you find me?" The dog didn't answer, but his tail wagged once, like he understood everything Victor couldn't say. By morning, Hope had improved. She drank a little water. Her breathing was steadier. Victor stayed the whole night. He even canceled his meetings for the first time in years. His assistant panicked. "Mr. Carlyle, you have 3 calls from investors and..." "Tell them I'm busy," Victor replied. "Busy with what?" He paused, and then said the truest words he'd spoken in a long time. Something that actually matters. Who was this older dog, and where had he come from? Later that day, Selena sat beside Victor. "I ran the older dog's microchip. It's inactive. No registration, no reports, nothing." Victor raised a brow. "So, he's completely off the grid?" She nodded. "But get this, he's not a street dog. His teeth are in good shape. He was trained at some point. He follows commands. He protected the puppy. He waited." Victor leaned back. "So why was he on the street?" Selena hesitated. "Sometimes they get dumped. Owners move. People die. Others don't want to pay for medical care. Some just leave them behind." Victor looked at the dog again, the one who had walked past luxury cars and ignored tourists holding burgers, just to bark at him. "Then why bark at me?" he asked. Selena smiled. "Maybe he saw something in you that you forgot was there." Victor didn't hesitate. He signed the adoption papers that afternoon. One for Hope, one for the older dog. When Selena asked what he wanted to name him, Victor didn't speak for a few seconds. Then he said, "Rust." "Like rusted metal?" she asked, surprised. He smiled. "No, like something strong that time can't destroy. Just needs a little polish." Victor's penthouse had never felt like a home. It was spotless, cold, and full of things no one touched. But the day Hope and Rust arrived, everything changed. Rust curled up on the velvet rug in the living room like he'd always belonged there. Hope, still recovering, nestled into a blanket inside a basket near Victor's bed. That night, Victor sat on the floor and watched them breathe. He didn't feel alone. He didn't feel rich. He just felt human. In the weeks that followed, something started to shift. Victor began walking Rust in the mornings, down the same sidewalks he used to ignore. He bought toys for Hope, treated like royalty in her recovery. He stopped checking his phone every 5 minutes. He started smiling more, laughing more. Even his staff noticed. His assistant asked one day, "Sir, are you okay?" Victor simply said, for the first time in a long time, "Yeah." Victor couldn't stop thinking about it. How many more Rusts and Hopes were out there? Dogs who barked and no one listened? Animals trying to be heard in a world that kept walking by. So he did something wild. He used his money, but this time for something good. He launched a foundation, the 4 Barks Project, dedicated to rescuing and rehabilitating stray dogs across the city. He poured millions into mobile vet vans, food banks, adoption events, and educational programs. He even had a mural painted across a downtown building, a silhouette of Rust, barking, for short sound waves, painted in glowing red behind him. Beneath it a quote, "Sometimes a dog doesn't bark for food. He barks for you to wake up." Months later, Victor stood in the alley where he first found Hope. It was cleaner now. His team had renovated it into a mini shelter hub. He knelt, Rust beside him, and lit a small candle. A silent thank you, not just to the dogs, but to fate, to whatever force made sure that on that night, that dog barked at him. The man who once ignored the bark now hears what most never will. 6 months had passed. Hope was no longer the fragile, barely breathing pup she once was. Her fur had grown in thick and soft, a warm chestnut color with streaks of cream. She ran now, fast, fearless, full of life, sometimes too fast, tripping over her own paws, like she was in a race with joy itself. Rust, too, had changed. Not physically. He still limped slightly when it rained, and his coat still bore scars from the street. But something about his presence had deepened. He was no longer just a survivor. He had become a protector, a mentor, a shadow that never left Victor's side. The foundation, the Four Barks Project, was thriving. Dozens of rescues had found homes. Volunteers came in every week. Clinics were being built in nearby cities. People who had never cared about strays were now donating, sharing stories, changing. And yet, Victor knew something wasn't finished. Something still hovered, a chapter not yet closed. It was a Thursday. The Miami sky, so often painted in gold and blue, turned dark. Clouds rolled in fast and low. By 3 p.m., the city was soaked in thunder and wind. Victor was at the main Four Bark shelter, reviewing building plans with the team. Russ was at his feet, like always. Hope sat by the door, whining softly, ears twitching. Selena, the vet, walked in soaked, wiping her face with her sleeve. "There's flooding downtown," she said. "I just came from there. One of our partner shelters lost power." Victor stood immediately. "Do they need help evacuating the animals?" Selena nodded. "They've got puppies. And no generator. They're scared. They called me, hoping we could help." Victor didn't hesitate. "Let's go." Victor's driver took them through narrow back streets, trying to avoid the rising water. Rain pounded the windshield like fists. Hope had to stay behind. It was too dangerous for her. But Rust refused to stay. He sat beside Victor in the back seat, tail still, eyes locked on the road. When they arrived, the shelter was chaos. Water had already seeped in through the floor. Puppies cried from the back kennels. 2 volunteers were frantically stacking boxes to keep supplies dry. Victor rolled up his sleeves. Selena shouted over the thunder, "We have to move the dogs now. Crates first." They worked like clockwork, loading crates, wrapping them in plastic, carrying pups through ankle-deep water. Rust followed every command like a trained canine. Victor was lifting the last crate when he heard it. A bark, not from inside, from outside. Victor turned. Through the rain, on the far side of the building, was a collapsed fence, and behind it, another dog, smaller, drenched, eyes wild with fear. It barked once, then again, then again. Victor's heart froze. 3 barks. Rust ran forward. "Wait," Victor shouted, handing the crate to a volunteer. He followed Rust into the storm. The barking grew louder. Rust darted behind the building, paws splashing. Victor slipped but kept running. The dog barked again, 4 times. Victor turned the corner and stopped. There, beneath a tree tangled in wire, was a mother dog. Her back leg was caught, bleeding, tangled in a broken fence post. And next to her, a litter of newborn pups. They were soaked, barely moving. One wasn't breathing. Victor dropped to his knees. Rust immediately began licking the pups, warming them. Victor reached under his coat and pulled off his shirt. He wrapped the pups inside, pressing them against his chest. Selena came running. "I saw you go, oh my God. We need to stop the bleeding," Victor said, voice steady. Selena knelt beside him, using a cloth to apply pressure to the mother dog's leg. "She's in shock." "I know," Victor whispered, "but she found me. She called me." Selena looked confused. Victor just shook his head. 4 barks. Again, they rushed the mother and pups to the main Four Barks clinic. The power flickered, but stayed on. Victor didn't leave their side for hours. 2 of the pups were stabilized quickly. One, tiny, completely still, had no heartbeat. Selena tried everything. CPR, oxygen, warmth. Victor stood over her shoulder. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't let her go." And then, a twitch, then a squeak. Selena exhaled so sharply it turned into a laugh. "She's back," she said, voice cracking. Victor turned to Rust. The dog sat, soaked and silent, but his eyes, they glowed. Later that night, Victor stood in the observation room. The pups were sleeping. Their mother's leg had been treated. Rust slept at the door, keeping watch. Victor sat in a chair, staring, and it hit him. Each bark he'd heard that night at the restaurant, each one had meant something. The first bark, look. The second, listen. The third, follow. The fourth, help. He had done all 4. And now, he understood. Sometimes, you don't need words to be called into purpose. Sometimes, it's just 4 barks. The next day, a photo of Victor, shirt soaked, holding puppies, went viral. Headlines read, "Millionaire Hotel Mobile Rescues Puppies in Miami Storm. 4 barks that changed a life and saved dozens more." Victor Carlisle, from boardrooms to back alleys. Victor didn't care about the fame, but he did care that people were finally listening. Sometimes a bark isn't just a sound, it's a wake-up call. It all started with one man, one meal, and a bark he almost ignored. Victor Carlyle was the kind of person who had everything: money, power, a name printed on skyscrapers. But none of it could fill the silence in his life. And then came Rust, a stray who didn't beg, didn't whine, just barked. For times, like a knock on a door Victor didn't know was still there. That bark led him to hope, to a fragile life wrapped in an old towel, abandoned in a box. It led him to a truth he hadn't faced in years, that no amount of success can replace connection. That love doesn't ask for resume. It just shows up and waits to see if you'll listen. In saving two dogs, Victor found a part of himself he didn't know was missing. He learned that real strength isn't measured by wealth, but by the lives we choose to protect. And when a storm threatened again, when the world turned dark and others ran away, Victor ran toward the bark, because this time he could hear it, not just with his ears, but with his heart. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true animal stories, right here on Paws and Claws.